Yeah, welcome everyone to our first get together here in the Hazard team in IARPIC. And John Beemeyer, Tom Douglas, Steve Gray, and I, we realized that there is a great opportunity here with IARPIC family to bring the community together and learn about the activities that we have going on around creating tools and data to support communities in the Arctic that are dealing with various kinds of hazards, some very unique to the Arctic region. So that we can create this space to not just learn what's happening and what people are doing, but also to connect to each other, us that are interested in this kind of work. We're taking science and making it useful to the real world in there. So today I am very excited to have a big team here from the Alaska Coastal Cooperative, which is a brand new project here. And we're going to hear from a couple of people in the team here. The lead is with Chris Maio, who is an associate professor in geoscience department at UAF with the Geophysical Institute. And he is the director of the Arctic Coastal Geoscience Lab and also this Alaska Coastal Cooperative. And then we're going to also have Casey Ferguson, who is an Indigenous Engagement Coordinator with the Alaska Coastal Cooperative and with UAF College and Rural and Community Development. And she's the QI on the project, leading the Research Lead Network and other components also of the so-called ACTION project. And then we have Abigail York, who is a professor at Arizona State University. She's a QI on project, and she focuses on governments and other social science components. And we have Angela Johnson, who is the president, the native village of Shignick Bay, environmental coordinator, and QI on the ACTION project. So Chris Maio, we'll hear from them, and then we'll take your questions afterwards. And let's roll. Go for it, Chris.
Okay, thanks so much, Anna and Meredith, for setting this up. Let me get my screen share going there. Is everyone seeing that okay?
Yep, looks
Great.
good.
Excellent. So yes, thanks so much for having us present here. And I'll just a couple clarifications. Casey is a man. He's going to be joining us, and then Angie is from the village of Nelson Lagoon. So we'll hear from each of them. And I thought it was important to have a team from the project, that represents all the different components, because it is really a pretty big project. And so I think I wanted to have a lot of voices to show that how dynamic it is. But yeah, we're very happy to present today on the Alaska Coastal Cooperative and the newly funded ACTION project. This work has really been something that's been years in the making. Over 5 years, we've been really working towards this, and it culminated in the 2022 formation of the Alaska Coastal Cooperative at UAF. And this started through some internal UAF funding, and then we got a philanthropic grant from the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation, and that kind of kickstarted things. And then we just got funding from NSF's Navigating the New Arctic program. So we'll cover in this seminar today, we'll look at some of the roots of the ACC. We'll talk about some of its main themes, and then we'll get into some of the specific focus areas of the ACTION project. And so looking back at the roots of the ACTION project, it really started about 8 years ago through a Sea Grant funded project called Stakes for Stakeholders. Some people might recognize that. And it was an erosion monitoring program we did in the Bristol Bay area. And it brought together 12 tribes and other stakeholders from around the region, state and federal agencies, the Bristol Bay campus, and other folks. And what it did, we started with a workshop, and then we went out and visited communities and carried out training and developed these monitoring sites. And it went on for many years, and it allowed us to really develop these long-term relationships with several tribes across the region that allowed us to kind of have that as a foundation to move forward with this much larger project. And we also were able to really learn some of the main priorities and needs of some of the communities in the Bristol Bay region. And so when we formed the ACC a couple years ago, we took those kind of relationships, that reciprocity that we built, we expanded to other partners in northwestern Alaska and northern Alaska, and we really honed on a threefold mission. And this threefold mission comes from all of these conversations we've had through time, and it includes enhancing communication. And this is something that's clear on multiple levels, but really trying to elevate the community voice when it comes to coastal research and looking at the impacts of hazards, really trying to make that voice heard by the university scientists and the agency folks on the federal and state side, as well as our industry partners. The second main mission is really to advance applied science that delivers on the priorities of the community. So we want to identify the priorities through that communication, and then we want to deliver products that actually meet those needs. And so advancing applied science is a big one. And then the third one is really the one that we've heard continuously for many years now, is really the workforce development and training side, to build that local capacity to do the science, to participate, and also on the same side, build the Western science ability to work in indigenous communities in a reciprocal way and build that trust through time as researchers. And so now getting into the ACTION project, I want to start by thanking the National Science Foundation's Navigating the New Arctic program for investing in ACTION and the long-term mission of the ACC. And the ACTION project is really helping to realize that threefold mission with, a significant award that's really allowing us to kind of put into action, so to speak, a lot of these ideas that we've been working on. Again, this project is really large. It's very complex. There's over 60 people involved, over 30 organizations. And so, having Abby, Casey, and Angie on here is great because that's going to give you a little bit of a look at how dynamic we really are. And so ACTION is made up of over 30 partners. You can see many of them here. They span tribes, universities, private industry, federal, state, and international organizations. And the great thing about this project is all of these organizations are linked in one form or another through relationships that have been formed over several years. And so we have this kind of foundation of trust, this foundation of reciprocity, of knowing we're going to be able to deliver. And as that foundation, we're able to more effectively create this synergy that really the ACC and the ACTION project is about. We're really trying to leverage the resources, the expertise that already exists in order to take action on addressing those local community priorities and really advancing the science, both in regards to some of our goals as academics and state and federal agencies, but also really, again, trying to drive those community priorities and delivering those products they need to adapt to climate change. And so looking at the map of our project partners, we have 8 community partners, and this includes down to the south, Chignik Bay, Nelson Lagoon, both in the Bristol Bay region. Then we go down on the Aleutians, Atka, out into the middle of the Bering, St. Paul Island, up north into the YK Delta, Hooper Bay, out to St. Lawrence Island, Gamble, and then further north, Point Lay. And then over in Canada, we have Tuck. And so we have 1 international partner and 7 Alaska partners. And we really seek to strengthen the existing relationships we have with all of these communities. And that's an important part, that these communities didn't just pop out of nowhere. People on the team have been working with these communities for years now. And so we started with that foundation of trust with the communities, which allows us to really enter into this process and ideally be successful. the other point I want to make on this map is we're really trying to leverage the work and the facilities and the expertise in UAF's rural campuses. And primarily we'll be starting in the Bristol Bay campus, and then we hope to expand up to Nome and even Bethel. And so that's a key part of ACTION, is really leveraging those resources. And we have several focus areas as far as like kind of some of the general focus areas for the research. You know, this includes building a communication network across our partners. The work I'm involved in, mapping and monitoring coastal hazards, environmental change, that sort of thing. We have a whole governance component where we're really trying to ensure that we understand the governance framework in order to kind of move our results into actionable products. And then we have some different modeling components, and of course the building technical capacity through that workforce development. The key thing is that through all of this, we're really digging into not just these research topics, but the process of doing them in a co-production manner. So we're really trying to co-produce across the project. That is part of the research, is studying that process, evaluating it, and improving on it, so that as the Alaska Coastal Cooperative expands, we're able to do a better job. And so through this process, this is a new way of doing science, and we know we're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna have many iterations. And so we kind of have a go where we're gonna go for a couple years, have a serious evaluation, and then revise that to move it forward. So through this, we hope to really hone down on a really effective co-production, co-creation of the work. And this is where I'll turn it over to Casey to talk about the Community Research Lead Network.
Hi, one of Casey Ferguson here, the Indigenous Engagement Coordinator. One of the main components of this project that we have is a network that we call the Community Research Lead Network. Within each community that's funded from this project, we have a CRL. I'll call it a CRL moving forward. And essentially the CRL is a liaison between the community and the university, who works directly with me. They're assisting in putting together and contributing to that co-production of knowledge. They're an integral part of putting together the communication framework, applying the advanced sciences that we have in this project, and basically the overall success of the project. In 4 years, we'll go back and assess this, and the CRL position will be a really important part of that. Another component that we have to this is the Community Advisory Board. This is made up of 2 to 3 local members of the community, members of the tribe. And so far within some of our communities, a lot of these members have been tribal members who sit on the tribal board. And they're acting as guides, kind of as mentors to the CRL and to the project for each community. Essentially what we're looking for is we're looking for the needs and the priorities for these communities in terms of coastal erosion, coastal flooding, and coastal hazards. And the CAB members will be the ones who guide the CRLs and the PIs toward that direction. And essentially they'll come and work with Chris, myself, and the other colleagues on this, and we'll identify what those needs and concerns are. And in doing so, we'll be able to find out what these communities really need. And then from there, we'll start to well, not attack, but utilize the skills and expertise we have behind all of the members that we have to really figure out what's going on and how we can make it better for each community. Next slide, Chris. So this network is exactly what it sounds like, a network. Like I mentioned, there's a community research lead in each community. or in each tribe. They're acting as a liaison to the majority of the action team. They assist in the co-production of knowledge, and contribute traditional knowledge and a lot of the field work out in the communities. One of the important, I just want to highlight the importance of traditional knowledge, and working with communities out in rural Alaska. That's a pretty important part of who they are as Indigenous people. We're not just working with anybody in Alaska. We're working with folks who have a long history, an important culture, and the land that ties into that culture. I'm Indigenous myself. I'm originally from Chivac, so it's important for me to highlight that. But within this network, we have a lot of people behind the scenes. We have the co-PI, who are the main people in each community. We have the steering committee, which is made up of at least a dozen other colleagues that we work with. We have the advisory board who's guiding the project, and the community advisory board that's centered in each community. And you can see here that in each of the 8 tribes that we're working with, we have one CRL, and the CRL looks different in each community. This is not a position that we put into the proposal where we determined what it was going to look like. And this is where that co-production of knowledge comes in, is we're working with each tribe, with each community, to build what this CRL network looks like for each community. I'll use the CIC Chignik Intertribal Coalition as an example. We just met with them yesterday, and the way that the PI in Chignik Bay is going to structure this is he's going to have one full-time CRL working throughout the year, one seasonal CRL who'll come in and do a lot of the field work in the summertime, and then they're going to utilize an intern from one of the native corporations to come in and do some work during a certain time of the year. And the way that he structured this is a contracted position, so it's contractual. It's not hourly, it's not salary. It's something that he can utilize this person throughout the whole year without having to move around funds or have to worry about time. So that's one of the ways that we're looking at building the CRL network. In other communities, we're looking at different ways to tackle this, so it's going to look different in each community. The visioning process for this project basically will take place in each of the communities that we're working with. So meeting with the CRLs in each community, the main goals are to come out to these communities, meet people and have fun, identify what those needs and concerns are, and basically work from there. This is where we have all of our meetings, where we talk with the community members, talk with other entities, and learn which projects that they've worked on in the past. And then we go and evaluate at the end of this process what needs to be done, what can be done, what should be done, and how we go about that. And moving forward with the presentation, that's my portion of it. I'll go ahead and introduce Angela Johnson out of Nelson Lagoon.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully you could hear me fine with this hotel internet. My name is Angela Johnson. I am the tribal president for the Native Village in Nelson Lagoon. I'm also the IGAP coordinator for our environmental department and a commercial salmon fisherman in Nelson Lagoon. Today I'm going to go over some of the history of my community and how this action project is going to fit in with all the work we've already been doing. So we could go to the next slide. So Nelson Lagoon is located on the Bering Sea side of the Aleutian Peninsula. We are Unangan, Aleut based community and a commercial salmon fishing based community. Like a lot of the state, salmon runs through our veins and is a huge part of our culture and our way of life. We have about 40 year-round residents. The population goes up in the summer for fishing. Our tribal council is our self-governing body. We don't have a city or anything else, just the council. And we've been dealing with a lot of issues with erosion and sea level rise, threatening our way of life. This photo here is a nice aerial shot of Nelson Lagoon. The top part of the photo is the Bering Sea. The bottom part is the river that we fish in, or the lagoon. You could see the airstrip on the right. That's where our airport is. That's how we get in and out of our community. And there's our village on to the left. And as you could see, we're pretty close to the ocean there. So not a lot of room to move around. But this slide here, Nelson Lagoon climate adaptation work. So this shows there's a list of our environmental assessments that we've already done in the past. In 2007, I believe the Army Corps went around to a lot of places doing baseline erosion assessments. We got our coastal erosion study done by HDR in 2014. Another one for numerical wave model from HDR, and another shoreline map report, basically showing the progression of erosion and what it's going to look like in the future. We did a lot of work with HDR, and then when we got partnered up with UAF, we had them come out and we did more studies on our coastal hazards and trying to predict what the erosion is going to look like in the future for us. This slide also shows the different organizations that we have that serve our community, like the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, APICTA, which is the Aleutian Pribilof Island Community Development Association, and APIA, our Aleutian Pribilof Island Association. We're also working with the Alaska Institute for Justice on a project called Permafrost Pathways, which is also helping us move forward in our data collection and protect and place efforts in our community. We can go to the next slide. So in Nelson Lagoon, we've been dealing with erosion and sea level rise, since basically the beginning of our residency there in Nelson Lagoon. But lately it's getting more intense. We used to have, really solid winters, and back when we were frozen over for the winter time, we didn't have to worry too much about the intense winter storms that we get here in Alaska. And now, it's been a long time since we've actually healthily froze up, and it's leaving us exposed to the elements. We used to get, the Bering Sea would freeze up in front of town. It would protect us from northerly winds. Our river would freeze, and it was a great protection for our location and where we live. But now we're not seeing that freeze up. There's not a lot of ice accumulation, as we all know, and it's just getting less and less each year. So we are dealing with a lot of erosion from those northerly winter storms in Nelson Lagoon. In this photo, you could see somebody's home. This is on the river side. This is a high tide with a little bit of wind, and you could see plain as day that a person's house is right on the edge of the water there. And it's threatening our vital infrastructure, even our airport, our runway, and our fuel farm where we get our fuel and gasoline. And for us, it's way easier to manage the erosion on our riverside. It's just easier, like you see here in this photo, there are sandbags there that are working as kind of a breakwater. We're also working on another project to finish our breakwater and have those go along like basically the whole front of our community there on the riverside. But on the Bering Sea side, there's not really anything we could do. I mean, you can't stack rocks out there. You can't really build a seawall out there. It's just the Bering Sea does what it wants to do, and you can't, there's no really way in fighting it. So right now we've been dealing with the erosion washing out our water line where we get our water from, and it's turning into a big fiasco for us in Nelson Lagoon. But as of right now, our community decision is to protect in place where we live. This slide shows another photo, kind of that same view. There's another home there that you could see that's close to the water's edge and the sandbags that are placed there right now. We have urgent needs, and I'm only going to go over a few of them in this presentation. I'm going to talk about our protection of safe drinking water, our fisheries, and our need for more data collection. So Nelson Lagoon, we've had quite the fishery in Nelson Lagoon. When I wasn't even around, the fishing industry in Nelson Lagoon was incredible. There were, you know, tenders lined up all along the river, cash buyers there. Everybody was living pretty much the high life in Nelson Lagoon off of their fishing income. And, you know, with the changing climate and mismanagement of our fisheries, we have seen a huge depletion in Nelson Lagoon specifically. There's communities all along Alaska, all along the coast that are dealing with, you know, lack of fish. And it's come to the point that we are, you know, we keep going to the Board of Fisheries, which, you know, basically makes the book for the guidelines that the Fish and Game is supposed to use to regulate our fisheries. And we're not making any headway. So what we found, what we know that we need to do is we need to start doing our own data collection in Nelson Lagoon for our fishery. This photo is of myself and my husband picking up our low water set, and this is what we do. The whole community fishes, and it's a generational thing. It gets passed down to you from generation to generation. This photo is of our safe drinking water dock. That's where our water comes from. So we get our water from a lake that's about 10 miles west of the community. And in 1983, that's when the line was implemented, and the crew back then, community members, had to bury a water transfer line from the lake to the community to holding tanks, and we pump water from there a few times a year and fill the tanks up that are in our community. And then we have our treatment center right there in town where our water gets treated and distributed to the community. And lately, like I said before, our water line has been washing out due to the bad storms in the winter. So this photo, or these photos, show how bad it gets when the tide is high. You could see how much of the line is strung out right there in those photos. That's our water transfer line. That's where our water goes through to get to town. Like I said, it was buried in 1983. What's really interesting about this is when it was to be buried, one of the rules was it had to be buried 250 feet inland from the bank. So if you could imagine, 250 feet is completely gone in certain areas of the coastline where I live. We have since been able to rebury the line, but this last winter, another 100 feet washed out in the same spot that we had reburied it in. And, you know, it's just a struggle. The community, and along with a lot of other communities in Alaska, are dealing with these climate effects, these changes, these threats, and we're all kind of doing it on our own. And what's great about the Action Project is getting us together. You're working together with people that are either dealing with the same things that you are, or you're working with scientists who help with the research and data collection. And it's just a really great project to be a part of. This slide here with our data collection, you know, it's really important for us to have our data collection Indigenous based. Traditional knowledge is a huge factor, I think, in this project specifically. And for those of us living in these rural communities, those of us who have been watching the changes, studying the changes all these years, you know, and doing this work pretty much on our own. We have to apply for grants and figure out how to protect the community. I mean, it's not about waiting for money or anything. The water line's washed out, the crew of guys get down there and rebury it. You know, we have to do it. It's what we have to do from where we live. So when we are looking for data collection, we want it to be based in our Indigenous knowledge, but also it's really important to collect all the data to show people. You need to show the data. That's what we have learned through these years. It's easy for us to say, well, this is different from 20 years ago, but if we don't have the data to show it, people don't really like to listen. And you know, we have solutions like to some of these issues, like the water line washing out and our access to safe drinking water. We are working currently right now on getting an extra holding tank for the community so that we won't have to pump water in the wintertime. That will alleviate some of the stress for us when when we have those big winter storms. And working with Action is you know, I'm really excited about this. I've been doing this work for over 10 years, which might not seem very long to some people, but, you know, I've lived in this community my entire life, and watching the changes and doing this type of work where sometimes you felt alone or sometimes you felt like you weren't making any headway. And now being a part of the Action Project, I feel like we are moving in the right direction, and I'm very grateful to be a part of it. And thank you so much, Kagasakung. Thank you for listening to me, and yeah.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Abby York. I'm a professor at Arizona State University and one of the co-Is on this project. And I'm going to talk about one of our focal areas of research, governance. Nelson Lagoon illustrates many of the challenges and opportunities for convergence research. One thing that Angie pointed out was the role of governance, as well as the tremendous amount of work that communities have already done on climate adaptation. Communities express understandable frustration with Western governance and policy and inaction on community-identified priorities, coastal hazards, and adaptation concerns. In the Alaska Coastal Cooperative and Action Project, governance is a cornerstone. It is multi-level and spans jurisdictional boundaries, including government and non-governmental entities such as non-state actors, nonprofits, private firms, and advocacy groups. Governance is based upon institutions, including the rules, norms, and shared strategies that shape our decision-making. It includes both Western and Indigenous institutions. Governance is critical to grappling with environmental challenges and injustice and to colonialism. Importantly, we are very interested in reimagining novel governance arrangements that address community-identified priorities and that center community self-determination and sovereignty. So how are we going about this work? Building on Casey's discussion of the networks of community research leads, steering committees and community advisory boards, as well as scientists and partner organizations, we are all learners. We embrace both epistemic and cultural humility as central ethics of our work. We have developed a multi-step process for this work. We begin with a visioning process with workshops with the community. Through this process, we are identifying research priorities as well as developing community-tailored research processes. Although we are embracing a co-learning approach across communities, each community is diverse, heterogeneous, with long enduring governance. The processes and questions will be community-driven and specific to each. With our Community Research Lead Steering Committee, Community Co-Is, and Community Advisory Board, prior to and after each workshop, we are gathering relevant documents, reports, and secondary literature related to each community. We will be using diverse social science methods, including interviews, surveys, document analysis, social network analysis, thematic coding of documents and interviews, natural language processing of documents. Our focus is on understanding existing and developing novel multi-level governance frameworks. As a governance scholar, I can tell you that this team is on the leading edge of development of co-production of knowledge, approaches, and methods within the field. For communities to co-identify process, questions, and priorities, and to be centered in multi-level governance research. And for Indigenous science and knowledge to be valued and put into conversation with Western knowledge and science is quite rare in governance scholarship. Our process is to begin with and center communities, to leverage our community and partner network, and to move outward to other levels and entities that are critical to actionable governance science. As you can see in our hearing, we are at the outset of this work, but our goal is that communities will be further empowered to advocate for much needed change through an iterative co-production process. And so I think I'm turning it back to Casey now. Oh, there's the methods that I just described. Oh, sorry, back to
Great.
Chris.
Great, thanks so much, Abby. So yeah, given the short time here, I'm just going to go through this kind of quickly, but certainly a big part of my research and part of the team is, coastal mapping, monitoring, and providing data products for hazard assessment. So we have a number of things going on. The USGS doing storm surge modeling. We have permafrost assessments in some of the northern communities, and we have a pretty good ocean and nearshore water level observation program that includes putting out some bottom-mounted ocean moorings in the northern Bering Sea, as well as putting out a number of spotter wave buoys. And Casey, do you want to cover this workforce development slide just in a real briefly?
Yeah, sure. So the workforce development and education is a component of the program where we're utilizing our tribes, the capacity that we have in the tribes. We're utilizing UAF's rural campuses in Bristol Bay. Eventually we'll be utilizing the Nome campus, hopefully. We're working with tribal staff in educating certain parts of the project. One of the big things that we're looking at doing is eventually implementing drone training. We were just talking about this yesterday, and getting individuals certified so that they can utilize these drones to go out and do their mapping. And then we're also looking to utilize some of UAF's resources. One of the things that we're doing is we're looking at Sikulak, and we're gonna have this big cruise where we invite not only members of the project from the UAF side, but we're looking at bringing in people from the communities and working with each of these members on certain parts of this project. Chris?
Great, thanks, Casey. Yeah, and this is our last slide here on this convergence research cruise, and this is a super exciting part of the work and really brings together the whole ACC mission. It really is embodying that, enhanced communication, applied research, and training and education. And we'll have about 22 in the science party, which will include about half of our Indigenous partners, as well as some of the regional leaders. And it also will include scientists such as myself, and also educators and a filmmaker. So a part of the project that really is going to bring it all together, sailing from Seward to Nome, putting out buoys, moorings, conducting multi-beam surveys, and really trying to build those relationships to propel this forward. And that's something we're looking at the long term here. The ACC, the Alaska Coastal Cooperative, isn't just the action project. We want the action project to realize the ACC, and then we want to gain sustainable funding sources that move us forward into a permanent organization. And so we'll be knocking on a lot of funders' doors over the next few years, seeking to gain that sustainable funding sources. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We have a little bit of time for questions and comments. And we have a discussion question here that Abby was going to introduce. I think we've got a few minutes here for bringing this up. So go ahead, Abby.
Yeah, just so given the extensive and time-consuming planning and reporting undertaken by our partner communities like Nelson Lagoon over recent decades, our objective is to move beyond mere documentation of challenges and opportunities. We also aim to avoid a narrow focus solely on those rarely read scientific studies and articles. So we're asking you to draw from your experiences and your expertise and to provide us some insights of how we can translate knowledge into actionable initiatives. And here again are our 3 core objectives. So help us to move beyond just, reports or scientific studies. How do we make this actually happen? We're asking you. So raise your hand or join us in the chat.
Thank you so much, Chris and Abigail and Casey and Angela as well. That was very, 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 very lovely to hear, and really super impressive how you pull this together. And I appreciate the long-term vision that you have, Chris, where you see this to remain beyond, the NSF funding that you have. And I'm curious, a quick question here. Are you considering this long-term lifespan of this effort, Coastal Cooperative, and you mentioned many different funding sources, are you also interested in having like partners coming and say, hey, we got this, we academics here can produce this product, but we need someone to guide us in what they need? Like, are you looking for partners like that to kind of help grow and expand the cooperative?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we're looking at, really identifying the needs in the communities and then teaming up with those fellow collaborators and really somewhat serving as a matchmaker. So there's this academic scientist that wants to study this particular issue. There's this community that needs that issue studied, and then we put the puzzle together and hopefully create that synergy.
I love it. Loads. Thank you. All right. See if we got some questions from people on the topic that Abigail shared. Like, what have you learned that can help co-production efforts? Or if you have something on a different theme, you are so welcome to.
Don't be shy. We'd love to have your questions here.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I thought, yeah, go for it, Billy. Awesome.
Okay, one of the things that I kind of find interesting, we're collecting a lot of data, and especially in the area of water surface elevations from storm surges and all of those kinds of things. And I'm just wondering what efforts are being made to apply those data to community planning, for example, first floor elevations of the structures there. Where's the erosion likely to occur, and how might you plan the communities to avoid perhaps some of those erosion areas? Those kinds of things that go into the normal community planning activities. How are we going to merge all of the data that's being collected into that effort?
Yeah, that's a good question, Billy. I think in many ways, it's really that communication side of things to start, is really identifying with the regional, federal, and state agencies and others, what are the data gaps? Okay, so we might need first floor elevations, we might need bathymetry, things like that. And then integrating in it through for flood modeling, where actually the USGS and Lee Erickson is really working with Deltares, the best, storm surge modeler in the world, is really going to be integrating a lot of the water level data, such as the ocean mooring data, the wave buoys, the bathymetry, and local observations into their models that then produce these flood hazard maps in this iterative process with the communities that will actually create these hazard maps based on the first floor elevations, based on the local topography, and identify different scenarios where some of that stuff might be at risk. More on the kind of looking at the erosion side of things, we will integrate the data into a hazard analysis report that clearly provides a lot of the products and data in a format that others, such as engineering firms, the Army Corps of Engineers, could easily utilize. And then we have, Abby's component, the governance, which is really understanding what pathways we need to take with those data products to actually have action taken on them, to actually put them into use in the communities.
And if I could just jump in on that, I think, again, the process and the way that we're working with, Casey leading our, community research networks, and then having folks like Angie that are a part of the process. I think that, as Angie showed, I don't remember how many reports and planning, you had many on your slide. And so, instead of it being outside of the process, having like some of those processes co-identified with community, I think I'm hopeful that will actually make it into something that could be, operationalized. But to your point, Billy, also we will be talking with regional federal entities, maybe some of you all that are on this list, about those things as well, to make sure that it's more actionable.
Fantastic. And Anna has a question along the lines here too. Are you working with government departments about needs, guidance, and into local policies to be budget items?
Yeah, certainly we have partners, at the USGS, at the State of Alaska Geologic Survey, Coastal Hazards Program, as well as NOAA. And so we're utilizing those resources, including ANTHC, who's done an incredible job at identifying some of the needs across Alaska. And so we're distilling all of that information and really targeting those areas where there's the gap. So there's a lot of money coming into the state. There's a lot of new sensors being put out. And so we're going to leverage that to benefit the communities on the project and also fill any data gaps that need to be filled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got 5 more minutes, and I know Meredith wants to close us off too. So Anna, do you want to add a comment to that?
Yeah, Chris knows well my work with the North Slope Borough, and so probably do a lot of people. I work with the emergency management department up there, and I know he probably knows that I don't know if he was in one of my meetings at the DC meetings past week, but after working with them, guiding my nonprofit about hazard research that they needed done and that we stepped up to the plate to help with, we finally got it infused in their hazard mitigation plan for the first time. So it's actually in local policy now. So it's not only this, we work with Lee too, and USGS with USGS and coastal hazards. Most of our data is actually housed on the coastal hazards website for our community monitors. So that's, to me, it's taken years, right, for this to happen. So I wish it were quicker. That's all I want to say. you guys go out there and find communities and see if you can get it infused in policy, local policy. That doesn't mean it's going to get money spent on it, but at least in a plan, right? That like a comprehensive plan or hazard mitigation plan that actually helps them get federal funding, right? So.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ann. Yeah, Ann is a pioneer in those activities. So when you actually get something in a hazard mitigation plan that's at the fingertips of the tribe, I think that's a real victory there.
Yeah, congratulations. That's fantastic. So we have our next IARPIC webinar from this team will be on the Arctic Environmental Engineering Data and Design Support System, which is up at IARC, and that will be in late April. And Meredith, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. Yep. Just a couple things. Responding a little bit to that question that was posed at the end about improved communication and advanced applied research. It's an area that IARPIC is really interested in. We are, I think, our kind of core of IARPIC is bringing people together, communication across all of these different federal agencies and other groups, but most of our community historically has been the research community. And so bringing in those other voices is something that we're still growing. And this team and this meeting is kind of one of our steps in bringing in this more applied focus, which I think is crucial moving forward. So just saying that, and I'm happy, Chris, at any point to give kind of more specifics about some things that IARPIC has learned in that space. And then just a note for the community that we are in the process of updating our implementation plan. This is the what we will be doing for the next 2 years. And so I'm putting a link into the chat now with a form that has more information about the implementation plan and also asking for everyone's feedback on that here. And this meeting will be posted on our YouTube channel probably by Thursday. And so you can send it around to folks who were not able to join today in real time. And I think that's it from me.
Yeah, one last thing. If you have activities on data and tools to support communities in addressing hazards, please share with us because we're compiling that and putting it into a report to share with IARPIC community here. So thank you, Chris and team. Much appreciated. All have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
the opportunity.
Thank you, Chris.